What's up, Dawson? I appreciate you being here. As we mentioned earlier, I appreciate your patience in getting this scheduled, and I'm very much looking forward to diving into your brain a little bit.
Yeah, no, look, man. I know we've been trying to make this happen, so I'm glad we finally could, and looking forward to it.
So I want to hear it all from you, but just to kind of top the episode off, I'll let everyone know some of the things I know about you, and there's a lot more to learn. But you were basically a former finance guy. You were an investment banker, a corporate investor. You had small businesses. You then sort of turned your life around and became this kind of action adventure guy, breaking world records, climbing peaks of mountains, doing all sorts of wild things that I want to hear everything about. One of the things that I would love to start with before we get into those stories, which I'm sure everyone's going to want to hear, you mentioned in your bio, as well as some other interviews I've seen with you, that a pivotal point of your life was when you lost your mom and your girlfriend. And I was wondering if you can kind of start with that. Tell me about your relationship with those two women and how their loss has sort of affected you in emotional way that has pivoted your entire life path.
Yeah, it's an interesting question to start off with. I like how you're coming at this from a different angle. Is obviously it's when you lose a parent, that's just it's part of life. But it's until you experience that, it's hard to put into words, kind of what that is. And my mother was an exceptional woman. It's just, I mean, as much as I loved her, I respected her in a lot of different ways. I learned so much from her, and we had a close relationship, which I really valued. And but that being said, is kind of at that point in my life, I really struggled to feel a lot of things. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. Is I was just very kind of like programmed,
Mm.
and I was kind of stuck in my head, and really all I could feel at that time was just kind of like pain and confusion and frustration because there's so many elements in my life that I wasn't content with, that I wasn't performing to the level that I thought I should have been performing. And in her passing just really kind of helped put in a greater perspective of I'd reached a point where I didn't know if I wanted to continue. Like, I mean, I thought about hurting myself. I thought about just about just I don't know if I want to if I want to be here anymore. And her passing just kind of helped kind of put that in better perspective of saying, listen, it's time to either check in or check out. And that I think that was kind of the biggest point of it. And then also, my girlfriend at the time is that she and I, when I lost her, she and I broke up. And for me at the time, it was a big thing because I saw something in her and I saw a potential future in her where I thought, maybe this is somebody that I could be with for a very long time. And I'd never felt that way before with anybody. So really to look out into a future, that I saw, and now that future was gone, and then look into the past where my mother was a part of that. Now that past was gone, even though obviously it's the past. It was a big time of change for me. And also, as men, it's interesting how we incorporate the feminine, into our lives. And those were the two most important women in my life at that point. And
Mm.
to lose them, one of the past and one of the breakup, different degrees, but to lose them so close together was just a very interesting point. And again, that was at that stage. Again, I think a lot of people can relate to it. Was no matter what I did, it didn't seem to be working. And I just felt very disconnected, very isolated, very alone, misunderstood. No one knew what I was going through. And it was just really that point in my life. I said, listen, I'm either going in full steam or I'm going out full steam. And it really was that serious of a point for me.
Did you have that close of a relationship with your mom, or was it more of just like a milestone in your life that you weren't sort of prepared to deal with at that time?
Yeah, it was. I think we had as good. We had a very good relationship. To be totally honest with you, looking back now, is what I do regret is not knowing more about her as an individual. Is I knew her as my mother, and I loved her and respected her as my mother. And what I knew about her as an individual, I thought the world of her. But I wish I'd have seen her and got to know her more as that individual.
Mm.
But and then it was just like I was saying earlier, is when you're a child and you go through these phases of growing up, that's just kind of one of those phases. But with me, my general approach is typically just to harden up And my approach at that point was just kind of harden up and to close down, and to shut down and to kind of make my world a little bit smaller, get a little bit colder, a little bit meaner. And I knew that I didn't want to relate. I didn't want to use her passing in that way, as I
Mm.
wanted to try to use it as a different element to help, emerge from the difficulties I was having.
I'm really curious what kind of kid you were, because having these kind of dual paths, I think you're very relatable in the sense that so my career path has been an artist, but I also have three businesses with my wife, so I have that strong business side, the creative side, and I'm at the phase of life where I guess we're in the similar age bracket and similar enough to say that you get to a certain point in your life where you look back and you start comparing yourself to your peers. Should I have taken this path that made me way more money, but maybe I would have sacrificed more of life's enjoyment? Should I have taken this path that this guy over there took that maybe was more fun, but maybe it didn't make as much money? And here you are, sort of having both experiences where you had the financial impressive stuff on paper, at least, and you had the money and the resources, and then you put all your stuff in a backpack and started rowing across oceans and climbing mountains. So it's like I'm wondering how those two different sides of you reconcile and how they presented as Dawson as a little kid.
Yeah, it's honestly, I'm still trying to figure out what the hell I want to do with my life.
Yeah, me
And
too.
it's a great question, and it's weird is to be in my mid 40s, but to still sit. There are certain elements inside me that feel like a child that's looking out this great big world and saying, "What do I want to do with my life? Like I could do this and this and all this kind of stuff." But it's I think ever since I was a child, I've always had a big motor. Meaning that I've got a tremendous work capacity, and I enjoy work, and
Mm,
I enjoy doing difficult things. I enjoy being challenged. And for some reason, I think I'm pretty quick on the uptake on a lot of things. Is I'm very coachable and I learn things quickly. So that's just kind of always been my way. And um, I've always kind of put, um, I guess, contentment and enjoyment and happiness. And we can get into it later, but happiness is a word. It's really that happy never factors into my life. Like I don't like the word. I don't use the word, for a variety of reasons, but it's always been about kind of about connection and performance, for me, and just kind of, what can I get out of myself? And I think that's been there as long as I can remember. And that's kind of taken the number one spot in my life, for as long as I can remember. And then now it's been, really just the past couple of years that I've been able to kind of sit back from that and to gain a greater perspective and understand about, how can I use that to impact others, and how do I relate to others and the impact that I want to have, and so it's been kind of a good transition to
mm.
going from that self-centered place to a service-centered place with that greater sense of perspective.
So I'm going to rewind for a second. What were you like as a kid? I want to know because you seem like the kind of guy that looking at you, you could say, "Oh, I could have fun going to a gun range with this guy," or maybe I can crunch some numbers and sit around Wall Street and have a coffee with you, or maybe I'll take an adventure and go rock climbing. Like, and that's cool. You seem like a Renaissance type of a guy, which I consider myself to have some level of that, although not as extreme as you. What were you like as a kid? Were you Matty, Matthew? Were you the tough guy in the block? Were you the nerdy math guy? What
Yeah,
were you like?
yeah. It's I would say it's is I was the chameleon. Is that I was is at that point. I think it was a survival mechanism that I learned early, was to be what I needed to be in the situation that I was in. And I don't mean that in a deceptive way,
Yeah.
like whatever. But it's if I needed to relate to people on certain level, I think I've always been good at reading people. Where you can put me either in a room full of adults when I was a child, or literally around a bunch of guys, blue collar workers installing playground equipment, or you could put me anywhere and I give me 30 seconds and I can relate to it and become, what I need to become.
Yeah.
I think that was always part of it. But again, I don't mean that in a deceptive way at all. But and also it just there was just something a little bit different, where I felt kind of disconnected, or a little bit isolated, or just I've always felt my brain just works a little bit differently.
Mm,
And sometimes I think that's a good thing. Other times it's been a tremendous challenge where it's created a level of separation
hmm
where I'll be around people and I'm like, I'm not feeling what these people are feeling. I'm not feeling the emotions, or I'm not seeing what they're seeing. So that's been kind of a struggle. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, where you feel a sense of loneliness and isolation because you're like, something feels different and I don't know what it is, and I don't know if it's good or bad. And it's taken me 4 decades to try to learn and understand that a little bit better,
Yeah.
and try to use it for good, and growth and enjoyment in life.
I think that is really relatable to a lot of people listening. I think there are certain kinds of people which I don't necessarily relate to that just have one thing. Like they're their friend that only does this one thing. That's all they've ever done. They're great at it, and they're very single dimensional. And I think that there could be benefit to that. But I think there are a lot of people like us where you have many interests, and they're all very genuine and very authentic, and the many sides of you. And it is a curse and a blessing as well, because it's you know, to have this ability to be curious and want to pursue everything at the same time is very overwhelming. For people listening and hearing about these, you know, records that you have broken or tried to break, and these adventures that you're going to tell us about, for people that are like, well, that's sort of me. What do I do? I like people listening that are saying, well, I have this great white collar 9 to 5 job, but I really want to be doing, I want to be a chef in Thailand, surfing or whatever it might be. How do you, as part of your role of a coach and an advisor, how do you navigate men, especially through those tough decisions?
I think the biggest thing is to get quiet, and actually is to sit quietly with yourself and to kind of calm things down. Because today we have so much that's being thrown at us. Like we're just constantly inundated with different information or opportunities, and all these kind of things. We've never been more connected before. But I think that level of connection can cause a level of disconnection inside of us if we're not conscious of it. So is to sit down, get quiet with yourself, kind of peel everything away, and really understand what your values are, what your priorities are, and where you think you are and where you want to go.
Yeah.
And then kind of using that to determine what you want to start to pursue, and then prioritizing what you want to pursue, but then understanding what you're willing to risk and what you're willing to sacrifice in order to pursue those. Like for example, is when I started Dawson's Peak Foundation back in 2018 and started pushing into all this. Is I thought I knew what I was getting into when I was getting into it, but looking back on it, is I had no idea. Where
Mm.
I mean, I literally spent over the past couple of years thousands and thousands of hours training alone, in the mountains, on the roads, in the gym, stuff like that. And I've sacrificed time from friends and family, and I mean lots of money, opportunities to make money. And I mean, there's been tremendous sacrifices. So
Mm.
you have to understand that there's a cost to everything, that nothing in life is free. And if you're going to move in it into a certain direction, depending on how the magnitude with which you want to move, is to understand there are going to be things that you're going to have to give up in order to pursue what you want to pursue.
Hmm.
And unless you have all that kind of in place, it's going to be difficult to operate on a higher level in whatever area or arenas that you decide to move into. And some of that you can know before you go into, and some of it you just kind of learn along the way, and you have to continuously check in with yourself, say, hey, is this level of sacrifice worth what I think I'm going to get in the end? And unfortunately, sometimes we don't get what we think we're going to get. Then you have to be okay with, well, I sacrificed all this and I didn't get what I thought I was going to get. Now, how does that feel?
Right.
And so that can be a challenging moment as well. But I think if you just decide what's important to you and you go all in on it, then the cards fall where they may. But you have to be able to be content with, hey, I gave it my best shot, and this is how it turned out.
I hear you, and I think similar, but I'm going to play devil's advocate because I think a lot of people don't see things that way. It feels like, maybe I'm wrong, it feels like there's a growing sense of immediate gratification, entitlement, a lack of willingness to take risks. And couple that with the fact that AI is taking over a lot of industries, and a lot of the things that people want to do, love to do, or good at could very well be not even needed in the near future.
Yeah.
how do you cope with that? How do you see that when you see uh people that are younger than us and younger generations that feel like either they're not willing or don't have it in their hard coding to know what it's like to make sacrifices for a long-term gain like you're talking about, and when they don't see the path forward, how do you view the state of the world, and how do you view people that think in those ways? My wife just got me the new Insta360 X4, and I'm hooked. I just took it on a snowboarding trip with my family, and the footage is insane. It's like a drone was following us. And the selfie stick, yeah, it's invisible. Total game changer. And right now they're having a big sale and even offering free gifts with a purchase. You can check out my affiliate link. It costs nothing to you, but it does help me out if you make a purchase. Check out jalders.com/x4 for the latest offers, or visit insta360.com and use my code INRR6JU. That's code INRR6JU. I'll have it down in the show notes too.
And that's a great question. I think it's a very poignant question because I see what you're saying, and I see it now where it is about that instant gratification, and it's just nothing. And it sounds like a cliche, but it's true. Is that nothing that's worth having comes easy. And I know you can talk about it in a variety of ways, whether it be, say, physical goods, money or cars, or whatever, food, or whatever. And
Mhm.
in the greater sense of things, like where it be, emotional development, spiritual development, things like that. What I found, and look, what I have found in my life is the things that I value the most are the things that I've worked the hardest for. Number one. And then secondly, surprisingly, some of my initial perceived failures mean more to me than what I perceived as a success initially. And sometimes it took years for me to kind of see that and understand that.
Yeah.
And that's the I think the greatest challenge is, talk about, like, say, a workout, for example, because a lot of people can relate to going to the gym and working out. If you've got a big leg workout to do, and as much as I love working out, I don't always enjoy being in that pain, because I know when I'm going to go in there and get after a big, leg routine, it's going to take hours and it's going to hurt a lot. And but I know that, when I come through the backside of that thing, when I've walked through the fire, is that I'm gonna be a better person because of it. I'm gonna be a better person for myself, for my family, for my friends, for you, for the stranger on the street. Is I'm gonna be a better person for this world. And that's what people you have to understand, is that there is no free lunch to the other side. There is no free lunch to growth. And the biggest challenge is everybody's trying to sell people something, whether it's a hack, or whether it's take a pill or buy a shirt or buy a program or eat this food or whatever. Is that most of the work we need to do? Nobody can sell you something for it. It's simply time that you spend with yourself, grinding, kind of getting after this personal development. And it's just, you have to experience to understand the value that's associated with it. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that kids these days face. And I think it's just something you have to start to experience, and bit by bit, to say, hey, now I see, I understand it, and I see it. It's kind of like me explaining weight to you. If I'm like, this is what it's going to feel like to put 400 pounds on your back versus me putting 400 pounds on your back, are two different worlds. But
Yeah.
you have to slowly expose yourself to this stuff to understand that there's a difference there.
Isn't it interesting how certain stimulus affects people in different ways? Like, for instance, with your situation, you lost a girlfriend, your mom passed, and that for you was enough to make you think differently, act differently. For someone else's story, maybe they got their legs blown off. For someone else, maybe they got a paper cut, looked up at the sun, and it reminded them of something. It's so interesting that it's not necessarily, you don't necessarily have to hit rock bottom per se. You just need to, something you touched upon, you need to pay attention. You need to be
Yeah.
aware. You need to have a connection. You don't need to wait until these big monumental things happen. If you're more aware, whether it's meditation, whether it's working out, becoming more aware of your mind and body, I think is important enough, because maybe people listening, they'll have a smaller version of that to say, hey, what am I doing? So speaking of your pivotal moments, let's rewind. Let's kind of tell everyone some of the things that people sort of drop their jaw and open their eyeballs at. Can you tell a little bit about some of your adventures you've taken and things of that nature?
Yeah, certainly. And just quickly, is I was just to hit on it. I thought you just made a fantastic point about how imperative it is to stay open
Hmm.
and not to just sit back and look for these big, monumental things, these big life changes, like, having a child or someone's passing or winning the lottery or winning the big game, whatever it is. But every single day is we pass so many little things that can have a tremendous change.
Yeah.
And there is a power and a magnitude of every single second where your life can change, in a certain way, good or bad, and will never go back to being the same. And to your point is it's just so critical to stay open and understand that all these things are always there. And
Mhm.
just to stay mindful of that, because that's played a tremendous, role in my life. So I just thought that was a, great
Yeah.
point.
No, I mean, that's a good topic to stay on for a second or two. It's interesting. I think everyone has levels of trauma, and I think it's very important, imperative to be aware of when those traumas happen, even if they're the stupidest things. And I'll give you an example. A lot of my life, I had anxiety. And in my young 20s, I went to like a hypnotherapist, and they bring you back in like a hypnotic trance, and you kind of figure out where the source of this anxiety was, and blah blah blah. And it was so interesting being a young adult at the time doing this, because I was re-experiencing traumas, in air quotes over here, that I experienced as like a 5 or 6 year old. That hearing myself say out loud as an adult, I was like, that's not traumatic. That was stupid. But I think we go through those things quite often. Like someone might bump you on a subway, and that alone might trigger something in your
Yeah.
brain. So the more you can be aware of these little micro things that happen, or these little small things that you observe about yourself and how you feel, I feel like that's enough sometimes to make you shift gear. Do I go right? Do I go left? Do I take this job? Do I not? I know, like in my right after college, I got a job offer to work in New York City. And on the interview home, I was on the bus or the train, and I looked over and I saw all the zombies of the 9 to 5ers, and just seeing their faces blank, that alone made me be an entrepreneur my entire life. I've never had like a real job because of that.
Yeah, no, like, and I love what you're saying there, and that reminds me of something that I've read, and I try to incorporate a lot in my life is a lot of times, we're going to react to things. Let me take a step back. Obviously, we need to try to work to be proactive rather than reactive to things in a general sense. But when we are reactive to things, like someone bumping us on the sidewalk, or someone jumping in front of you and in line, or cutting you off, or whatever it is, or someone saying something to you, it's not that thing normally that causes you to be reactive. It's that thing causes you to think about something else that happened to you subconsciously when you were 4 years old or 5 years old. And now because now you're reliving this thing that happened to you when you were 4 or 5.
Hmm.
And I try to be very aware of that. Where something happens, I react to it. I'm like, wait a minute, am I reacting to that? Or like, what's the underlying feeling and
Hmm.
emotion that's causing? Then I try to look back into my life and understand, well, this is something that, like a theme that I've tried to work on for several years or several decades. And I think and that ties back in again, what we're saying earlier about being open is that, remaining open and remaining, trying not to be reactive allows you that second to sit back and to say, there's something else that's going on here, something else I need to examine here, which I think is a critical thing, which we're losing more and more these days because these windows that we have for communication and instant gratification keep closing down, getting smaller. So things are speeding up where really we need to kind of step back and slow down. So
Yeah.
this thing, and again, it just, all this stuff just works together.
Absolutely. I love, I don't know who first started saying this, but I've definitely heard it on Rogan a number of times, like about doing hard things every day. And I think that's so important for all humans, but especially for men. It's extremely important to kind of push yourself and be aware of the pain and what the pain is bringing up, and more so be aware of what your intentions are. Where are you going? And I try to always focus on the carrot and the stick. What am I running from? What am I running towards? Where am I now? Where do I want to go? Where do I not ever want to go again?
Yeah. Now
And
look, it's critical that we do hard things every single day. It's critical that we push ourselves and make ourselves uncomfortable every single day. And I don't mean just in a physical sense. I mean, everybody can go out and talk about, deadlifting or running 20 miles or, whatever it is. but even in, psychological, emotional senses, for example, is I had a conversation with a very good friend last night where I felt I needed to apologize for something, and I felt that we needed to get some stuff on the table. And it was not an easy conversation to have, and it's not always easy to apologize. But when I see that, I acted in a certain way where I wish I'd have said something, differently in a certain moment, and to recognize and say, hey, this person is a very important part of my life. I love and I respect this person. So it's important to me that, we deal with this. And
Yeah.
then we needed to have a hard conversation about the way that I felt they acted in a certain situation. And it ended up being just a wonderful moment. We got it behind us, and it pulled us closer together. So
Hmm.
that's another example of doing difficult things on a daily basis. But
Absolutely.
it's critical for our personal development, but also for fulfilling and maximizing the role that we play in the lives of others.
Absolutely. Speaking of hard things, I really do want to hear it from your own words on some of the adventures, because I want people to really get sucked into this episode. Like when I first read your bio and was considering having you on, I was like, hell yeah. I mean, I love this. I love to rock climb. I love adventures. I love all hiking and nature and all that great stuff. So, first of all, I'm personally grateful to connect with a like-minded soul, but I want to hear from you about some of those adventures, especially which ones maybe were not quite what you thought it would be. Some of the ones that you look back and you're like, why the F am I doing this? So I'm sure there were some.
Yeah, that's almost every day of my life. But yeah, that's so it's what we're getting into is in 2018 is I started a with a good friend of mine, Jay Jablonski, a charity, 501c3 called Dawson's Peak Foundation. And our mission is to inspire the discovery and pursuit of individual purpose. Get people to understand that we all have a greater sense of purpose, in our lives, and to live that purpose not only for ourselves, but to be of service to others, and to shift from being a more of a self-centered society to a service-centered society. And the way that we do that is we create large-scale global expeditions. We sponsor athletes, that are pushing kind of human potential, where viewers can watch them and say, well, if this person's doing X, Y, and Z, then I can do X, Y, and Z in my life, and just to draw a parallel to themselves, because we none of us. It's a challenge for us to understand how much we're truly capable of. So our current project, where I'm the athlete, is Project 7 for Soldiers, where in a 12-month period, is I was attempting to set 7 world records in a variety of activities, where 100% of the net proceeds are benefiting our partners in the project, which is Hope for the Warriors and the Gary Sinise Foundation, which are two of the highest rated veteran charities in the country. So the I know that's a long lead in, but here's
Oh,
the
it's
meat
great.
of it. Here's the meat of the answer
Okay.
is the so for Seven for Soldiers, within 12 months, my goal was to become the fourth person to ever complete the Explorers Grand Slam in a single year, which I'm sorry, the fifth person, which is climbing the highest peak on each continent and then skiing to the North Pole, South Pole, and then trekking solo unsupported across the Mojave Desert, and then rowing a boat across the Atlantic Ocean, and then finally flying a single engine plane around the world. And this was coming on, just after COVID. This is when Russia Ukraine kicked off in late 2020 or early 2022. So within that 12 months, as I was able to accomplish everything that we'd set out to, was when I think 10 for 10 on expeditions. The only two things I was unable to accomplish was getting to the North Pole because of Russia Ukraine. The pole got shut down, and because of COVID a couple years before that, the pole has been shut down, every year since no one's gone to the pole since 2019 or 20, which, just something we have to deal with. And then I was unable to complete the flight because the cost of the flight literally went up 4 or 5 times what our original budget was. So we decided the money could be better spent elsewhere.
Mm.
But so within the first 12 months from May 2021 to May 2022, was able to set 5 world records. Since that time, I've set another one. So we've got 6 world records now with the project, and it's just been a heck of a trip.
Man. Well, were there moments during that were particularly difficult emotionally and mentally? I'm sure physically all of it was challenging, but were there times where you mentally sort of were breaking down or scared or any of those sort of peak emotions?
There are. I mean, you can't go through stuff like that and not get into that space. And it's interesting because, when we talk about, things like that, about, climbing Everest or rowing the Atlantic or whatever, obviously these are big physical challenges, and people can relate to, physical challenges. But, and this is not to sound cliche, but 80% of it is mental. Is once you reach a certain physical capacity, then you can do what you're going to be trying to be, to do. And then it just comes down to, are you able to mentally perform? Or can you stay in the headspace you need to stay? Can you reach that headspace? And then can you stay there long enough, to be successful? And the ones that kind of pop out to me is sitting on Aconcagua, which is the highest peak in South America. Excuse me. And this was early 2022, in preparation or I should say prior to the expedition beginning. Back in 2017, when I had literally no mountain experience whatsoever, I tried to climb Aconcagua before even the concept of Dawson's Peak ever existed, and I failed to summit. And that was the first kind of failure on a mountain, or physical failure, that I'd ever had. And it was something that just stuck with me for years and years and years, and just burned really deep inside of me, that hell, I'd wake up 3 years later out of a sound sleep at 3 o'clock in the morning, just seething, thinking about, that. And, my entire group failed to summit because of the weather. But, fast forward is in 2022, and I'm sitting there on the mountain, and now as part of Project Seven for Soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
And I had just come out from being in Antarctica for a month, and I went from sea level to almost 23,000 feet in a matter of like 3.5 days. And we had about 3 hours left on this big summit push. And I'm sitting there, and I mean, I'm in really bad shape. Like, I'm experiencing HACE, which is high altitude cerebral edema. So my brain's swelling. I'm sick to my stomach. I've got bad diarrhea. I mean, everything, my world's spinning. I can't feel my feet. Like, I'm in bad shape. And I'm just sitting there on this mountain that now at around 22,000 feet. And I'm just thinking about, can I do this, or do I need to go back down?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about all the people that had sacrificed to get me there, and all the time and the money invested, like all these things. And it was just a really, come to Jesus meeting with myself. And it was just, am I going to do this, or am I not going to do this? And it just kind of got to that point where we all have to make these decisions at certain times in our lives, is what are we willing to risk in order to try to achieve the success we want to achieve? And at that stage, I just decided, I was like, look, I'm either going to summit this mountain, or they're going to pull me off this mountain, because I ain't quitting. And it's done. And, decided to go for the summit, and I was able to get it. And it was one of the longest, hardest, most difficult days of my life. But looking back on it, which relates to our earlier conversation, is I look back on that with such appreciation, and it's just pure appreciation, because it made me a better person.
Yeah.
And it showed me that when you think you're at your breaking point, there's so much more inside of us. But when we make that decision to kind of push past those points, and to perform to the level that we're capable of performing to, which sometimes can be very scary, to say, I feel like I'm at my breaking point, but to realize you're not, and to have that faith that you can push through it and be successful. So those can be some big challenges.
I've read and heard in zillions of podcasts the concept that once people achieve these monstrous achievements, there's a very sobering, almost hangover type feeling afterwards, of like, okay, I did that, now what?
Yeah.
And it's almost like a depression. And I think everyone who's done anything significant in a relative sense to themselves has experienced some version of that. You have a wedding day, and then it's over. You make a painting, and then it's done. You get a goal, and then you're done. Go to the moon, etc. Climb a mountain. Has that been something you've been dealing with at all? Achieving these monstrous things, and then coming back and being like, well, was that worth it? Now what? What do I do next? How do I achieve that dopamine level again?
I've experienced that 100% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting is that I experienced the same thing before that, when I was banking full time. So when I was in investment banking, I was doing mergers and acquisitions.
Mm-hmm.
So the company, I was a managing director with a company. We were selling companies valued between normally about $30 million and $250 million. And to sell these companies, it's normally a six is fast, It's normally like an 8 to 10 month process where you are just grinding for
Yeah.
8 to 10 months. And then one day when the deal closes, you wake up and it's gone and you have nothing to show for it besides a little bit more money in the bank. And it's gone. And there's just this sense of loss. And
Hmm.
this happened time and time again throughout my investment banking career. And what I found was when I started, these activities with Dawson Peak Foundation, when I came down from Everest, which is the first expedition we went on where had a successful summit, the first thing I felt was this depression. And I started feeling the depression literally in Camp 4 at 26,000 feet because I'm like, it's gone. I'm like, this is something I spent years and years and trained for thousands of hours for is now over with. And then I was like, well, I've got, after this, I've got Denali, I've got all this. And I had the entire project in front of me. But at that moment in Camp 4, I mean, I was sad, man. I was 3 hours off the summit already. And I was already sad, thinking about it. But that ties back into what we were saying earlier is you can't do these things, for a particular reason in too much of a sense. Is we need to do these things for and in and of themselves,
Yeah.
and to be able to sit there and to kind of digest it and to make the most of it. Because if it's always about the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, that's just a path to ruin. You can't look at that. And honestly, that's something that I've struggled with, even during this process, is just to live them and experience them in and of themselves, and to be open and to be just appreciative of them. And that's helped me kind of to limit, that depression. But it's a very common thing that people are going to experience. I think it's just part of the human nature.
I'm going to ask this for a personal reason, and I'll tell you why in a second, but have you found yourself outside of obviously the marketing and the business aspects of what you're doing and the fundraising, and outside of those metrics, have you found yourself losing interest or having moments of I'm over it, I want to do something else? And I'm going to tell you why I'm asking that. I'm asking that because I'm sort of experiencing that, to be totally vulnerable.
Yeah.
I spent my entire life wanting to be a working artist, wanting to make money from my fine art. That's all I've ever wanted to do. I've always been the artsy kid, the outdoorsy kid. And I developed a career where I've got my art on magazine covers and side stage with rock stars and insane opportunities. And it's been a number of years now where I still love it, but I have a lot more moments of like, what else can I do? And I'm trying right now over the past year or two to try to make it fun again. And I feel like the way I've been doing that is alleviating some of the pressure valve by focusing on other things. Family. I've been playing guitar more. I've been working hard on other businesses. I've been changing up the way or the subject matter that I paint, finding new ways to make it fun, because I feel like once you do what you love for a work-related purpose, no matter how hard you try, and I've talked to many musicians and artists about this, it seems pretty common, it becomes work at some point.
Right.
Have you experienced that yet? Or are you going through that? Is that part of what you're talking about?
No, look, I think you said that well, and I've definitely experienced it. And even I think even achieving various levels of success hasn't really helped with that. Like for example, with Project Sanford Soldiers look, and this kind of ties also to what we were talking about a second ago, I've been fortunate enough to set 6 world records. And I thought, going into it, I just looked, I'm like, oh, if I can just get a couple of these records, then life's going to change and I'll change and the birds will be singing, the clouds apart. And I can tell you this, man, it doesn't feel the way you think it's going to feel. I'm very appreciative of what I've been able to do, but to be honest with you, I don't give 2 craps, about the records. Like they don't. I look at them like, it doesn't feel like you think it's going to feel.
Right.
And I think you have a great question there, and it's a great point. Is there have been numerous times throughout the project that I've thought about closing it down. And look, this has not been this up and to the right, go this way on the up and to the right, is that where it's like, I felt bad. I found purpose in my life. I started an organization, started setting records, this and that, where everything's just been just hunky dory.
Yeah.
It's been up and down and up and down, up and down. And there have been times throughout the project where I've reached breaking points where I'm like, screw this. I want to just shut everything down, donate some more money and just move into a cave and just walk away from it all. Like I've been there several times, but it's what's helped me kind of get through that is understanding why I'm doing what I'm doing, which I think is it's more important than what you're doing. Is understanding the motivation behind it. And as we grow throughout our lives, the vehicle that we're going to have to try to deliver that greater thing behind it is going to change. And I think it's natural. I think it's important. So, for you, for example, it might be at once you if you want to deliver these three or four things in your life, about kind of who you are as a person and the impact you want to have, you might deliver that as an artist at one point in your life. You might deliver it as a father at one point in your life, or you might deliver it as a, fill in the blank. So I think it's less important the vehicle that we're using to deliver the message, but understanding who we're trying to be and the impact we're trying to have on others first, and then kind of backing into the vehicle that we can provide that to others.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I think one of the ways that I sort of have coped with it, and I find as I get older, my views on things shift as I think they should. And I feel as though when I'm doing a thing, whatever that, if I'm playing guitar or painting or with my kids, when I'm in that moment, that's literally all that matters in that block of time. And then I also realize that when I step away, that in a couple hundred years and 50 years and who knows how many years, doesn't necessarily matter so much. So if I'm working on a painting, that feels like it's the most important thing in the world, even though I know it doesn't make a difference in the slightest bit. It's sort of finding that yin yang balance of putting your all into something, but realizing, like, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. And I feel like the older I've gotten and the more famous people I've encountered or become friends with, or more crazy adventures I've had, you realize, like, it's cool, it's awesome, it's a great story, but it's not really what it's about necessarily. And I find more pleasure in a lot of the smaller things as I've gotten older. And some of the things that I thought were these monumental goals, I'm like, they're cool, they're good stories, they impress people, but like, whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I totally get it. I think that's where it's important to kind of to always reevaluate your values and your priorities.
Yeah.
And then who you are and the impact you want to have on others. And what I found is my life changed when, and this ties back what we were talking about earlier, is when I worked to transition from being self-centered to service-centered.
Mm-hmm.
Is when I started to make my life about the impact that I want to have on others, and how can I contribute to the world, and how can I contribute to the success of others.
Yeah.
And that's when everything kind of changed for me. And honestly, that means so much more to me than going out and doing, for personal acclamation or accreditation, or I guess acclamation, or accolades. That's kind of when my life changed.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point is, I think you got to be careful, because I understand what you're saying about, this doesn't matter or that doesn't matter. But that being said, is you never know what's relying on what.
Yeah.
So you gotta be careful to say that, because, like, if you put a painting together, somebody might come in and see that painting, and that might create something in their life where I'm like, this is a life-changing moment, because they related to something that you did, and then they went out and they impacted the lives of 5 people, they impacted the lives of 20 people. So it's like, we never know what's going to come from what we do.
Sure.
But to your point is, it's just doing it. I love what you said about being in the moment. So when you're in something, it's be in something.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I've struggled with, and I think a lot of people can have struggled with, is not being able to be fully present. Whether you choose not to be present or subconsciously, you don't allow yourself to be present. But I think it's a beautiful thing that whatever we're doing is to be doing that thing. And the more that we can do that, I think the more kind of we're going to enjoy what we're doing and create better products from that.
Hey guys, as someone who prioritizes fitness and well-being, I know how valuable it is to have a supplement and training plan that works for your body type and your genetics. We now live in a time where we can optimize our health and nutrition based on our own unique DNA. That's why I'm excited to partner with the DNA company. Their DNA test goes beyond standard genetic testing. They provide custom recommendations for diet, exercise, mental health, and lifestyle. Plus, they offer specialized tests like multi-cancer early detection screening, which can identify cancer through a simple blood draw. If you're like me and want to take control of your health, don't miss this opportunity. Use my link, thednacompany.com/jalders, to unlock exclusive discounts and special promotions. Discover what your DNA can reveal about your best life. thednacompany.com/jalders.
I bet you there's a lot of people listening that are thinking in their head, well, that's great for you. You're this finance guy that's selling hundreds of millions of dollars of companies. I'm sitting here trying to get my rent paid. Um, I'm sure you've come across people like that. I would like to know, number one, what kind of advice you'd give to people that are just stuck in survival mode, which is unfortunately most people, right? And then it makes me think that I'm also wondering that when you were younger, if you can go back in time, would you have taken the same path? Because on the one hand, having the resources and the financial accolades that you've achieved in your life certainly gives you a safety net to do these awesome things you do now. But then I'm wondering, would you have done that to have that safety net so you could do these cool things, or would you have just been like the traveling dirtbag in a van doing those more adventurous things and saying, "Oh, screw all that fancy shiny stuff"? What do you think about when I say those things?
Yeah, it's tough. And honestly, this is something that I think about, a pretty good bit. And one thing is I have been fortunate enough to achieve a certain level of financial and professional success in my life. But it certainly didn't start that way.
Yeah.
I still in my office is I still have a statement from a bank, when I was like 21 years old that has my account balance was negative 26 cents. And I would have had like 13 cents. I went in and literally bought a pack of peanuts and it set my account negative. Then they dinged me, for more. And I literally had, and I kept this receipt from the bank. It's just as a reminder
Yeah.
about this stuff. Don't take this stuff for granted when I literally had negative money, to my name. So I've been there in a lot of ways. It's taken me a long time to
Yeah.
get where I am. But I think about it a lot about knowing what I know now. If I went back, what could I change? Things like that. The biggest thing that I would change is to learn to connect with myself earlier. I think a lot of my life I was just chasing things and didn't really know why I was doing what I was doing, and really wasn't aware of who I was and what was important to me and why it was important to me. And I think that's just critical in kind of what we're doing
Mhm.
and how that relates to people that are struggling on a day-to-day basis, just to pay the bills or just to get by, things like that. That's where it's you got to start to prioritize, things in your life and not just do something because that maybe that's what's expected of you, but it's because of what you value, and it lays in line with what you want out of your life. And I think that's the biggest thing. And also there's so much more inside of us where people think they're at certain points and are like, I'm just clawing from day to day. I can't do anymore. I can't think anymore. I can't, whatever. You'd be surprised if you figure out a way maybe to be more efficient or to work harder or to work longer. There are ways to kind of get through these things where we don't see that capacity, inside of us. And then also just, to prioritize, what's important to you. So if you're struggling, you're like at the end of every month, I've got whatever, $37 left. I can virtually guarantee you if you sit back and look at your life, there are things that you can do to change that, whether it's spending a little less money here, working a little bit longer there, finding more ways to be efficient here or there. And it's like these little pennies start to add up. And then, the pennies turn into quarters, they turn into dollars, meaning whether it's money or time or resources or, capabilities, the little things start to add up. And you kind of have to lay this groundwork. And sometimes it comes faster than others. And that's just, part of life.
What is your current investment ethos? Are you as risky with your finances? How does your mind when it approach investment in finance now? And is it drastically different from how you are out in the wilderness as far as risk goes?
It's is When it comes to stuff like, to say, finances and security and things like that, is my number one thing is I want to have a certain level of coverage and a
Mm.
certain level of safety. And it's that kind of mindset of don't risk what you're not willing to lose. Is that, in my life, is I normally cut out a lot of things that I don't feel are absolutely necessary in order to kind of get my nut as small as possible. And then make sure I've got enough coverage where I can, I'm not, constantly, kind of stressed out about it.
Yeah.
And then once I was able to cover that, then I take, certain portions, and then there's kind of like a truncated approach where is, certain portion will go to having a certain kind of return. Then on top of that, I'll take some more and try to have another return. And then maybe there's some kind of home runs I want to try to hit. Then I'll take a smaller portion and kind of put it out there.
Hmm.
So I kind of look at it in kind of that staggered approach. But when it comes to, say, being on the mountains, things like that, is I'm much more willing to go all in and either kind of hit that big home run or fail, because just with my personality, I'm not good in the middle. Is I'm normally on one side or the other. And I'm not saying that in a way that I'm trying to pat myself on the back, because sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. But
Sure.
that's just kind of my personality.
Okay, that's interesting. Talk to me about climbing, 'cause I'm a big not well, I shouldn't say big, but I love rock climbing. My family climbs. I used to have a bouldering wall in my garage, and my kids have been climbing since they were in diapers. Talk to me about that a little bit. What's your how did you get into it? Are you a regular climber, or is this just like a mountaineering scenario for you?
Yeah, it's for me, it's mainly the, mountaineering and alpinism. Is I
Yeah.
enjoy big stuff. I enjoy stuff, over 14,000 feet, where it gets, rocks and snow and ice, and you're out there on kind of like longer expeditions for, hours or days or weeks.
Sure.
In terms of say technical climbing, is obviously it's something that I've incorporated into my training, and it's something that I've wanted to incorporate more, and I plan to incorporate more now that Project Seven for Soldiers is kind of coming to an end. I'm looking for the next projects. Is I love the type of climbing that you're talking about. I think it's fascinating, because you have to be, and again, this ties in what we were saying earlier, is you have to be so focused on where you are and so present. Is that you can't, you have to have an understanding of what's coming, 20 feet above you, but more importantly, it's what's, 20 inches or 2 inches in front of you that
Yeah.
you have to focus on. And you have to be so present all the time, which is such a challenge, which is kind of taps in that mental challenge with the physical element of it. So it's something that I look forward to incorporating more, hopefully in the next, couple months.
You know what I'm really curious about? One of the things I find fascinating is the stereotypes associated with certain activities. I'll give you a for instance of where I'm going with this. So I do yoga regularly, and I think there's for people that don't do yoga, I think there's this stereotype that all people in yoga just kind of float around on lotus leaves and sit and zenning out and burning sage. And I've found that being in yoga for a number of years, a good portion of those people are the most stressed out, high anxiety people you'd ever come across, and they use yoga despite that as a tool to get out of that, as opposed to most people. I think there's like, oh, you're so chill, you must be great, blah blah blah. And I find that with me quite a bit, because I'll do activities that I get really fearful or stressed out of still. Like I grew up, my dad was a scuba diver growing up, and I finally got the balls to get certified in scuba like 20 whatever years ago now. And every time I go out, I still get scared, but I do it anyway. I've had like panic attacks, you know, doing reef dives, like, 70 feet down. Not a great time for a panic attack. I go surfing. I've paddled out in hurricanes where I was extremely scared. And then there's some people that are the opposite. They're like, no, I'm totally comfortable, in my zone, no fear at all. It's all good. So there's like different types of people within these like umbrellas of scenes of tribes. I'm wondering where you fall into that with the things you do. Do you do it despite the fear, or are you just like, F it, let's go?
I think that the reason that I'm doing it is because I want the challenge. And I do want a level of fear and hesitation, because it's obviously a normal thing to experience that fear and hesitation, but it's unacceptable in my mind to give into it. And that's where I want to continuously kind of challenge myself, because it's like anything. It's you just need to expose yourself to something over and over and over and over. For example, like I was out flying the other day. I flew for 5 or 6 hours and was practicing instrument approaches and holding patterns, all this kind of stuff. And if you're not doing it all the time, you don't have to. You're trying to maintain a currency. Is you kind of get into it. You get into weather. You're flying in clouds. You're like, this feels sketchy. You're like, 7,000 feet up or you're 200 feet off the ground, come out of the clouds, stuff like that. But once you do it, you start to feel better about it. It starts to feel more kind of a part of you. So whether it's, yoga or flying or rock climbing or whatever it is you want to build that currency. And I think, kind of with that is what I'm looking for and I want to be continuously pushed kind of through that comfort zone, or whether it's even like breathing exercises, like breath holds, like sitting in the couch, in front of my couch here doing breath holds. Is there times where I'm like, this feels terrifying because I feel like I'm about to die, but obviously I'm not. But it's just, you got to continuously kind of put yourself in these situations, and just to understand is that we're so much stronger mentally than we give ourselves credit for. And we're not going to realize that and appreciate that unless we're continuously, pushing ourselves in some mental emotional capacity.
Yeah. You seem pretty involved in the world. You do stuff with soldiers, which I respect. You seem like you have obviously you have an adventurous and a patriotic side to you. So you must have views on a variety of things. I'm wondering what you think the most dangerous narrative that our society is selling people, and what would be a better and more honest narrative that people should work on having in their heads versus what society is telling and selling to us.
I think the biggest challenge right now is this sense of victimization.
Mhm.
Is that what's being sold to us on a continuous basis is that the world is doing things to you that you can't, I guess, that you can't overcome without joining some group or buying some product or purchasing some service, or kind of something like that. That the world is just acting on you, and you're just this helpless victim, helpless, hapless victim. And I think, and I'm seeing that from different groups, whether it be racial groups or gender groups or education or business groups or whatever. And I think that's probably the biggest thing, is that getting people to understand that we all have so much more power and capability than we give ourselves credit for. And I know this is kind of a theme I've brought up several times, but just because I think it's so true, is that combined with this thought of my life's going to get better when this person changes what they're doing, or this group of people changes what they're doing, rather than what we need to understand is our lives get better when we make our lives better, when we make ourselves better. And I think taking that level of personal responsibility, saying I'm going to make the world better because of how I'm acting, and the world's not going to get better when I can get this other person to change how they're feeling, and then to accept the power and responsibility that we have. And I think that the biggest fear that people have, honestly, is not that they're not powerful enough, but that they're more powerful than they realize that they are. Because with that level of power comes a duty and a responsibility. Because once we understand that power we have, we can't just sit back and say, it's outside of my control, I can't do anything about it. Well, you sure as hell can. And the question is, are you going to do something about it? And I don't mean about going out and changing others. I mean about changing yourself, and about getting on the path and staying on the path. And once we realize we have this level of power, and it's just on a daily basis, are we going to choose to exemplify that power and to put that power to work? And that can be a lot of work. It can be very scary. It can be very frustrating.
Yeah.
But it's just, I think we need to accept that on a daily basis. And I think when more people do that, we're going to come together. And I know this is a long-winded answer.
Oh,
And I think that's the challenge is, even though we're more connected than we've ever been, I think we're more disconnected. And
yeah.
we're looking at these differences. And that's the biggest thing I see when I come off a mountain, is that on the mountain, life is very simple. It's just, you make a little bit of progress, you try not to get hurt, and you help the person next to you. And that's life. But when I come back into society, I'm not going to talk to this person because of the color of their skin, or because they're dating this person, or they think this and they think that, and just all this division that's
Mhm.
just entirely unnecessary. And that's frustrating. It's like, at the end of the day, look, man, we're all people. We're all the same person looking for the same thing. We're just going about it in slightly different ways. And just, if we were to recognize that and kind of come together a little bit better, I think that's what we really need right now.
I love that. I think the same way. I think being out in nature teaches you that nature doesn't give a shit what color you are, what you like to do, don't like to do, who you are in behind closed doors with. Like nature doesn't give a crap about any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I think we're way more alike than we are different as far as our fears, our needs. Uh, obviously biologically, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I don't want to forget to ask you, you have a book coming out. I would love for you to tell people about the book, when they could expect to get it, what they might learn from it. Go.
Yeah, 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 certainly. So it's I'm excited about it. It's my first book. It's called Strength in Surrender, and it's really I've tried to create some step outside of just another book and to create an experience for the reader. And this is as raw and open and honest as I can be about my evolution as a person, about going from being this closed off, self-centered person to hopefully an open, service oriented person. And then the creation of Project Seven for Soldiers, of Dawson's Peak, of all the expeditions I've been on. So we talked about how high the mountain was, how cold it was, how heavy the pack was, all the pain and all that stuff in there. But more importantly, it's about all the lessons that I've learned and that I apply on a daily basis. So it's just there are my personal meditations in there, which are probably the 14, 15 most important things to me. But then also my journals from all these trips, which I never thought would be published. Like, these are just my raw personal journals that we haven't changed a thing on. And my goal here was, there's been a million books written about mountain climbing or ocean rowing, and it was this cold and it was this heavy and all this and that. And I want more than that. This book is for people that even if you don't care about Everest, if you never want to climb Everest, if you never want to row an ocean, if you never want to walk a 5K, it doesn't matter. This is about the human condition and about things that we all experience. So that's what I was trying to create with this. And there's also a lot of custom artwork in there that I commissioned, where I want the art to open people up emotionally. Because I think when we're in certain emotional places, then we receive information differently. So that's what I wanted to have. It's more than a book. It's hopefully an experience, for people that get a chance to check it out.
I'm really curious, what has been more emotionally and mentally challenging and difficult and just heart-wrenching for you? The adventures, the activities, the rowing across oceans, climbing mountains, flying in a plane through clouds, all of those things, or trying to create this new career, trying to monetize your adventures, trying to write the book, the promotion, the marketing, the blah, 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 all that stuff it's associated with it. Which has been harder for you, and which is more of a pain in the ass for you?
Without question, the one that's been a bigger pain in the butt is the back end, is
Yeah.
all the admin. I'm
It's
telling
not
you,
funny, man. People
I,
people hear your story and they're like, I don't want to climb a mountain. I don't want to. And you're like, no, man, writing a book and doing all this other stuff is way harder.
the book literally took a year of, I mean, so much work to put together. And something I failed to mention was it's going to release the audiobook, the ebook, and the paperback on January 7th of 2025. But it's all the back end admin stuff of posting on social media, of trying to get sponsors, because everybody's going for sponsor dollars, of trying to get attention, of trying to get donations to where we can donate to Hope for the Warriors and Gary Sneeze Foundation. It's all these admin things have been far more difficult than training for thousands of hours by myself, for going on Everest, doing all these things. That's been the fun part. Like, that's like the baseball game, when the practice is everything else you don't see in the background, which has taken up just so much time and energy.
Dude, isn't that interesting, man? Like, dude, if I was having a beer with you right now, I'd be clinking beers and just be like, you know what? It's like people listening, they don't realize that these accolades and awesome, bar stories that you have and these cool things you've done, that's the fun part. Yet people listening, they don't realize they're 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. plus commute, doing it 5, 6 days a week. They're already doing the hardest thing. And yet
Yeah,
they push off life's greatest moments because they feel like that's too hard, that's too much, that's too difficult, that's too whatever. And it's like, people listening, you're already doing the hardest freaking shit right now. You're already suffering doing these things that Dawson's here telling you is the hard part. Do the fun stuff. Right? That's
yeah.
what I'm getting from this. Do the fun stuff. Prioritize life's adventures, because most people listening are already busting their asses with work and all the other things that's exponentially harder.
It is. Look, is earlier this week is when I had my big muscular endurance in the gym, which is a leg routine, where I'm doing 800 sets per leg, literally, each leg.
Sets,
And
like
I would rather
one
do.
rep, 1, 2 reps.
Oh no, so sets of 20. So 20, 20, 20, 22, we get to about 800. but I would rather do that than to make a social media post. To me, the social media post is more painful than 800 reps per leg. So everybody has these things, but you're right. It's that there's the stuff on the, it's like these little things, this tedious stuff on the back end that just kind of adds up, which a lot of, parts of life I think are more challenging and more painful than like all this big stuff that you get to see when everybody sees all the fun stuff, but
Right.
they don't see the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of admin, that kind of goes into the back of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think about this all the time because people will say, oh, they'll talk to me and say, oh, I wish I can do something creative. I used to like to do blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking in my head, like, what you're doing, pointing to my friend that's doing this like 1 hour commute to New York City or more, plus whatever hours they're doing, like, that's way scarier than what I'm doing. Like to me, I'm in sort of a control. I can justify where I spend my time, how hard I work. I'm responsible whether I fail or I succeed. I'm like, you got to be stuck in a jail in a cubicle or an office with like you have business cards and you have, like I don't have to do that. Like to me, but it's everyone has their own idea of what's secure and what's scary and what is too much risk and what's not enough risk. It's so interesting that if you just reprogram your brain or see things through someone else's eyes, you're like, okay, maybe I'm just seeing things in a different way. Maybe it's not the only way to think. People go through life thinking like my way of seeing the world, my way of seeing career and money is the only reality. And like, no, you're wrong. There's a lot of ways to approach life.
Well, I can completely agree with you, and I can tell you from my personal experience is obviously I'm older than I've ever been, and this is the least financially stable I've been in a very long time.
And you're also
Is
the youngest you'll ever be.
Yeah, right. It's I was kind of saying that tongue in cheek, but it's if I had stayed in investment banking full time, professionally. I mean, I worked for 15, 20 years to build a career and then walked away from it. And I was in the prime of my earning potential. Is if I would have stayed in there, I'd be much further along professionally, financially, a lot more security and stability and all this stuff. Is That has taken such a hit compared to where I would be if I'd have stayed doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But being where I am now is I wouldn't trade any of it. You could put a lot of zeros in my bank account, and I wouldn't trade that for what I've been able to do and experience with where I am now. So yeah, I have a lot more instability in certain elements, but I feel better and I'm more proud of myself now than I would have been if I stayed doing what I'm doing. And I
Yeah.
think that's just where it kind of comes down to understanding, who you want to be as a person and what your priorities are.
What I'm seeing behind the messages that we're saying is I think people listening, what I'm seeing is that we all are good at certain things. We're all bad at certain things. There's some things that we can give or inspire to others, and there's certain things that we just freaking hate doing. Like you just said, you hate social media. I get it. I get that. Who wants to do that? Yet there's a good percentage of people listening that are like, I freaking love social media. I want to edit videos all day long and do hashtags in my sleep, and I freaking love it. And I think these are the kinds of things that the pieces of the puzzle sort of float by. And I'm like, you know what? If we can just connect with each other more, perhaps there's someone that loves social media that is just missing the adventure or motivation or discipline part that maybe could reach out to you. Maybe there's you know what I mean? And vice versa. Maybe you're like, hey, I can give you this. You want to take an adventure? I'll tell you how to do it. Blah blah blah. Or maybe there's something that someone could help me with. Like if we just connected with each other more and said, put our best foot forward and said, hey, I'm good at art, business, being a dad, whatever it might be. Can that help you in some way? Oh yeah, it could. Awesome. What can you do? Oh, let's help each other. There
Yeah.
needs to be more of that, but everyone kind of stays in their own bubble and everyone sort of tries to be the captain of their own ship with every aspect of their business, and it's hard.
Yeah.
It makes my job miserable because I'm forced to do things that I hate to do. And there's probably people out there that would benefit from something I could offer them and vice versa. So I feel like that's what I'm hearing and feeling. I'm seeing these like pieces of a puzzle floating by that we're kind of not grabbing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, look, I think you said that very well. And I think a lot of that comes from fear. I know, me personally, my natural tendency is to want to try to control things.
Mm,
And for me to kind of sit back and to give that control away, because I'm just kind of how I am by nature, and I'm very detail oriented. Uh, and for me to kind of sit back and to hand control over to somebody else it's a challenge.
Yeah.
But what I found is the more I'm able to do that is typically the better product that we create. Because look, I'm good at a lot of things, but there are a lot of things I'm not good at. And there's a lot of things that people, even though I'm good, people are much better. And the more I've been able to kind of sit back in my life and control less, but maybe do a better job of controlling less, and then handing off, different things, different people, my life's gotten better. The work product and the quality of the work product in my life has gotten better.
Yeah.
And I think it's a lot of that just kind of maybe ignorance, where we don't realize that people are better at certain things than we are, or that people are even out there are good at certain things, and then overcoming that fear of releasing some of that control. But the more I've been able to do it, the better my life and the work in my life has gotten.
Amen to that, man. That's awesome. Dawson, it's been great to get to know you. It's been great to hear how your mind works. Can you tell people where they can find you, how they could reach out? And if someone's listening that wants to maybe help with social media, how do they get in touch with you, Dawson?
Yeah, certainly. The best thing, the website is just Dawson's Peak. So PEAK, play on the word of creek, obviously, .com. So just dawsonspeak.com. And that's my personal site that links to our foundation site as well. On the foundation site, you can make donations to Gary Sneed's Foundation Hope for the Warriors. They receive 100% of the net proceeds. I haven't made a dime on this. The organization hasn't made a dime. And then also Instagram, which is just at Dawson's Peak, is the best way to do it. And like you mentioned earlier, Strength and Surrender, the first book is coming out on January 7th, audio, paperback, and ebook.
And you have adventures on the horizon that are happening in the next year, 6 months, whatever?
Yeah. So I was actually supposed to be at Carson's Pyramid, which is the highest peak they call it, it's around Australia. It's not Australia, proper, but on the continent of Australia. I was supposed to be there actually a couple weeks ago. That got shut down for some civil unrest in that area. So hopefully doing Carson's Pyramid, which is on the island of New Guinea, in March. And then we're going to try to go again to the North Pole in April. So the pole, nobody's gone to the pole, like I mentioned earlier, in 4 or 5 years. Last year I sat in Russia for 2 weeks trying to get there, and that failed. So hopefully this year in April we'll get that, and then that'll finish off the Explorers Grand Slam for me.
Awesome. That's great, man. It's been great to talk to you, Dawson. Thanks, man.
No, listen, I appreciate the time, and I'll tell you, is I've gotten a chance to obviously do a lot of these interviews, but I love that you took a different approach. I love the questions. I love the way that you're looking at things. And so thank you for your time. I've really enjoyed it.
Oh, man, I appreciate that. Thank you, brother. I really hope that you enjoyed that episode. If you did, please take a moment, leave me a review on Spotify and Apple especially. It takes about only 30 to 40 seconds to leave a nice review. You can just click on the stars. You can say something nice. I really do read them all, and it really does mean a lot to me. If you could just please do that, and also make sure you hit subscribe and share the episode. Connect with me online. Connect with our guests. We love all the interaction, so please do so. Also, please check out my website, jalders.com. I am an artist. I'm a father. I'm a family man. I appreciate your support. I would love to get your eyeballs on my artwork. So, yes, keep sending messages. Let me know who you'd like to see on the show next, and I wish you an awesome rest of your day.